They're not like Apple national.
Yeah, oh, that's what.
And you bounce off like
It's a total destruction of your automobile.
Yeah.
And I don't think Ripley's pushing it because they're not getting any money.
Yeah.
They're just not letting us know.
Yeah.
They should clean up their health insurance. Because they know every time they do it, they ask.
The blank screen.
It's potential.
No, however, yeah, everything actually
Think of an overdraft.
You guys just change this whole
Yeah, he actually gave us
You're welcome. Thank you for getting that off.
smaller Just ask me.
Well, I know, I think I could sell it, that's why I was surprised when they
Because I had that information.
Yeah, he said. He says I'm
Right.
Oh, of course, the
Oh, right, with live streaming. Yeah.
Streaming.
Well, there was a little
Right.
Yeah, I heard about the drawn on Christmas tree in Staple Place.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, that was we do like a big food thing, which
Right.
My kids, oh yeah. In fact, the last four, remember, I just left this morning for 7 minutes for the copper.
that's right, yeah.
So this large amount of water being used, I can guarantee large amount of water being used, my price less. The most we had 7.6 or 7.
Right.
20-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
And it's separated.
The local liquor stores did well, sales tax. The distillery did well, sales tax.
Excellent, thank you.
But he only has a pub license and he can only brew for his facility and he can sell some stuff he does on his facility that he can supply. Good. Tennessee.
Yeah. So there's
Right.
kind of possibly there's some line somewhere behind more about stuff coming.
No.
Yeah. Or way
You're totally good.
further way up, further up. I don't know. That's not possible. Probably not. I would have. We would have. In the map, we paid a lot money for that study.
So just so you guys know, the recorder is on live TV.
Right, yeah.
Right.
How you doing?
I got my wrap.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Thank you. How's this spot, Laverne?
Yeah, I need to
Move it.
come more forward so I
It's a
can.
lot.
Right.
You're right. Because your hair's messed. Yeah, my wife.
You're so true.
I would be.
I'll come grab it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Which is, I had said before, you just have to make it.
At first, it didn't look like it
Here's
was
what it is.
recording properly.
Don't cast it off as something off.
After the day, it's-
Is it delayed?
You got TV?
Button like radio TV?
Yep, we're gonna start recording this live.
Mentioned that.
Are ya?
Yes. Watch from home.
Then we can get it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Putting it in our flood file
That's awesome.
at the museum. In 100 years, it'll be down and have our 100-year flood.
Right.
We had a big flood in 1894, and a big one. And then 1969, had a
So
fair
I can come back if I have questions on that part. Just that
19.
all of a sudden.
47 or something. Washed our bridge out
Okay.
there by Lyons Valley Park. Had a bridge coming. That's my old home farm, you know that.
Oh, yeah?
Lyons Valley Park.
Oh, I didn't know that.
My great-grandfather
Okay.
homesteaded in
When I saw something in
1862.
the tournament.
Oh, nice.
And they sold it in 1962. And next to the town, 1976. Okay.
So, right,
I'm not doing
trying to get away from you. You want to go after Honeywell about the cost overrun, okay, or the cost overrun. The cost overrun
some places.
but the other, right, that's what I wanted to keep it separate.
Oh, donation box?
No,
Separate,
to
right.
put it aside,
Right,
like,
that's what I was trying to do.
you know, if I wasn't
I wanted to.
Oh.
they would need it. So I probably
Yeah, that's when you were involved in the wastewater.
Keep them in the sun.
Yeah, and the guys
My, yeah,
I
I get like allergic to my dog,
Wastewater,
like
is it
twice a year when she
$15?
goes to go, it's so bad.
Oh.
I
Stormwater.
know, it's terrible.
The wastewater. We were just at a wastewater, not stormwater. So you're just asking
So
about
what's the
stormwater.
difference? Two things?
Wastewater is the sewer, when you flush the toilet.
But we
Stormwater
already
is what's
paid
running.
out.
Right, stormwater is what runs down the
Yeah, well, I
street.
see.
So we weren't talking about that at all earlier.
Are you talking about it
Now,
tonight?
Wait, what's up?
Ozzy, our dog, he actually barked at the puppy last night because it was going after his tail. We got a piece of
Property owner.
haircut.
There's a lot, this is just the
teeth
first
and
run.
pulled it out. He's like, I've never seen, he's real sensitive about his tail. He doesn't like when he touches his tail.
Yeah, cute. That's so funny. I remember that, the golden retriever we had growing up. He would get brushed all day, but then not touch his tail.
So I got on that paper.
Yeah, that's
Man, that's off limits.
Yeah,
You wanna go back there and,
Pet him all you want, but not my tail.
yeah, right.
It does say 15, it's in the packet.
He tries to bite me, try to comb his tail.
Yeah, I know, that's how ours was too.
I mean, I know, I saw where you got charged 10 if you didn't pay it. But otherwise, I didn't see it. Towards the end, charge. Yeah, something under.
Knock him in, get you there.
And then, you know, we did also have, right, that's boulders. So that was showing that boulders is 15, 18, and 22. And Erie is going up to 16. Longmont is 13 for 20,000 square feet. So we were, ours is, that's the order.
So
All right. We're after 7 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get things started. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Lyons Board of Trustees for January 2nd, 2018. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Sullivan,
Present?
Mayor Pro Tem Greenberg,
Present.
Trustee Carvis,
Present.
Trustee Watt. Present. Trustee Kerr, Trustee Drystep,
Present.
and Trustee Miller.
All right, please stand for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'd like to take a reflective moment of silence, please. All right, thank you. Before I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, I do want to let everyone in the audience know that we're testing some new technology and that our meetings are now being live streamed on YouTube. So we did not publicize that they're available for viewing tonight, as we're still kind of getting used to this, but I do want you to know the microphone is in the back of the room, so it will pick up any comments made from the audience. So I just wanted to let you know that. You might just be aware that other people are listening. All right, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please?
I move we approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
We'll call for the vote. And the agenda is approved 6-0. We're going to go ahead and move on to the sheriff's report, and I just wanted to say on behalf of the board, I hope you'll pass on our wishes for a speedy recovery to Sheriff Pellison.
Absolutely, I will surely pass that on. I just received an update actually from the sheriff, and Jeff is doing much better, but still in ICU. We'll be there for a couple weeks. Some very serious injuries internal that are going to take a lot of time to heal. And of course, the emotional scars that those type of events for everybody involved will last a lifetime. So we'll keep our prayers for them and everybody else. The funeral for Zach will be on Friday, and it'll be quite a funeral, as they usually tend to be. So very scary.
Our condolences for his family and for the whole department as well. This is not on everybody.
You bet. You betcha. I don't have too much for the town today. The holidays went pretty smooth. There was very little going on in town, which was very nice. No major catastrophes over the holidays for the county border, and definitely Lyons, so that's always a good thing. One piece of information I do have is we have decided in the at the sheriff's office, we're going to do some realignment of our districts and staffing overall. So it will impact Lyons to a degree. Our current contract as it stands with the county, our normal county contract, will be the same. We will not lose any deputies or anything like that. We will not lose any coverage. What will end up probably happening is we'll probably see a few more new faces in and around. Right now, currently, the county is divided up into 6 different districts, and Lyons sits in the middle of District 3, which stems all the way from basically Nelson Road north to East County on the north side of Longmont, all the rural area around. So in the area that we call the flats, we have districts 3, 4, and 5, which just go from north to south. So what we've decided to do is basically split everything down the middle and have a north district and a south district. So this allots for more deputies in a certain geographical area. So with that in mind, the other thing that we've done for this coming year is we've eliminated our swing shift. The swing shift cars that come in, they come in around 2 and leave at 2 in the morning. That shift has just become unproductive as far as calls for service. I mean, it's a productive shift when they're doing stuff. But after analyzing all the data and the call load throughout the county, it's just not advantageous to have those guys on a shift on their own. So those guys are going to get split up and put just into the general pool. So we're going to go back to a 12-hour shift for all of our guys, 6 in the morning to 6 at night, and 6 at night to 6 in the morning. So the thing that allows for is additional deputies on a day shift and on a night shift. And then realignment of the districts allows for more of a group of deputies in the north and a group of deputies in the south. So again, we'll still have our basic contracted deputies day and night. Gary will stay here, Steve will stay here. I'm not sure who will be the night shift officers that are assigned to the town. But there'll be a couple of the deputies, the north deputies, that will probably report out of Lyons. So they'll have a little bit more freer range to, if nothing's going on, say in the Niwot-Gumboro area, they can be north. So I'm kind of thinking that this is a good thing for the town, where it's going to be a lot easier to bring somebody else in to either backfill if Gary's on a domestic out in District 3 or something like that and taking up time, we'll have more deputies to be available, and hopefully that will increase our response times to anything that's emergent directly here in town. So that will take place January 25th that's our annual shift change. So we'll see how that goes for the next year and monitor the data on that and see if it helps. So you might see some new faces. I know our favorite deputy, Brian Wagner, has bid for the North District, so he's already begging me to check out the Lyons, and I said, you don't have to beg me for that, it's yours. So it'll just make it easier, you know, especially somebody like Brian, who's a SWAT member, has to take on car and lives in the north part of the county. It just allows for more bodies closer. So I wanted to pass it on to you guys.
Great. Well, I think you'll get some positive feedback of seeing more of Brian.
I hope so.
Right. Okay. Any questions for the sheriff? All right, we'll move on to staff reports. Thank you.
Tonight's staff report is the flood recovery update.
Good evening, Mayor Sullivan and the board. Thank you for allowing me to treat the flood recovery update tonight. Starting out, we've had some developments with the Public Works site, and the FEMA director, Michael Willis, approved the purchase of the East Corridor site. So that was a major accomplishment for the town. So that's in the books now. We have the official letter. We're working with CDOT and a potential developer for the Public Works site to determine access off of 66 and cohabitation between the development and the Public Works site. We're hiring an independent engineer to develop the site, and so that's, I think, a positive thing to take some of the pressure off town staff. They have to do those tasks, and we'll still have Joe and others involved in the process so they can be the decision makers and the primary stakeholders. And FEMA's reviewing the version requests, so we're answering questions on that, so that is moving forward right now. And so hopefully we'll have that sometime soon. As far as the Public Works building, I'd like to thank Victoria and all the others who helped to realize $1.43 million from the Boulder Collaborative. And this was a team effort to get this done. And, we have to thank the city of Boulder and Longmont and Boulder County also for kind of making some sacrifices so that the town of Lyons can be whole again with the Public Works building.
I don't know if the board had this. Did we share this the last time?
No.
So I think just to elaborate, why don't you elaborate on this?
At our last Boulder County Collaborative meeting, which was right before the holidays, there are some excess funds that have been returned by other disaster communities that they were unable to spend within the time frame. I think we might have touched about this. And a portion of that, $4 million, 4.2, was to go to Boulder County, the city of Boulder, and city of Longmont toward their recovery efforts. And at our last collaborative meeting, those three communities agreed to give, of that $4 million, the top $1 million of that to Lyons to put towards our Public Works facility. And then they are going to split the remaining $3.2 million. So it was very generous on their behalf. They saw that we had this unmet need. Prices have changed since that Public Works facility was looked at 4 years ago, and that the facility is no longer adequate when it's not located next to the wastewater building. For example, we didn't have restrooms in that facility because there was one at the wastewater plant. We didn't have running water because of that, and things like that. So now that the site's going to be out of town, we have additional costs that were not covered by FEMA or insurance. So those three communities very generously gave us the funds we need so that we can build a true Public Works site That should be a full functioning, nice, I won't say state-of-the-art, but it will be state-of-the-art, sustainable, to a point, building. So it'd be wonderful.
And I would really like for the board, all the board members to sign a thank you card to send to the collaborative, just to kind of express our appreciation for that consideration. They didn't have to do that, so. If we can just circulate the card, I'll get it in the box if you guys can stop in this week. Try to sign it.
Okay. We have brand new Town Alliance cards. We'll use one of ours.
Right, but it was really extremely important to identify this funding at this point, because now the team understands what they can design, and they understand they can design a complete building rather than just a portion of the building or a phased building. So that was just awesome. And we do understand that the fire department's planning on adopting the 2015 fire code, which is actually a very good development, I believe, and it'll require the building, most likely require the building to be sprinklered with fire sprinkler system. And that's a good thing too, make the building safer. And, we have been starting to explore sustainability initiatives. So we've talked about our circulation fans in the vehicle bays, or increased insulation is an easy sustainability item, or doing other things such as landscaping and rain barrel irrigation systems for some landscaping. FEMA is going to pay for the majority of the site development, but they do not provide any money for irrigation systems or landscaping. So that might be something we can bring in under sustainability. We are prioritizing right now an insurance study, which is a study of what it would cost to rebuild the building that was destroyed today to codes and standards. And then we're going to go to the insurance company and compare that to what they have offered the town, and see if there's potential additional funds there. So we're hoping we may be able to increase the ante there. And we're looking at potentially selling or trading the temporary public works building. We don't feel like it fits very well on the new site. And so we're trying to see if there's some way to utilize the building to gain some additional funding. With McConnell Drive Bridge, they're moving forward quickly with that construction project. They've got a bunch of the caissons drilled now, or they're in the process of putting them in right now. And they've got the emergency drive in, as we reported last meeting. We have the contract amendment for construction administration executed. And so there's, and we're looking at the construction observation for your approval today. As for an on-site construction observation specialist to observe construction. There's nothing new on the Second Ave Bridge. Bond Park Phase 1 is essentially complete, but we did work it out with the contractor to build a check structure, and he was kind of waffling on that, but we convinced him to move forward with that check structure at this point. So that's going to complete the project. Bond Park Phase 2, of course, came in under within the estimated construction costs, so we're planning on starting here in January at some point. We're working on the contract at this point still. Then Lyons River Valley Park, we did have a successful bid for the whitewater features, Black Bear Hole, October Hole, and November Hole, and we're in the process of getting the contract together for Cold and Steel, who was a successful bidder to that. That's another accomplishment that we've made. We have been looking at the cul-de-sac for 4th and Evans. At 4th and Evans, we were trying to squeeze that into the existing version with FEMA However, they asked us not to do that at this point, so we decided that we should go back to the original version that we have, which is rebuilding the retaining wall and rebuilding the roadway there. So we'll look for additional funds to do some of the additional work that the neighborhood has asked for there. We'll try to find funds in other places like that, rather than going to FEMA. Let's see, so moving down to the northern Old Ford Channel is complete. The South St. Vrain Creek Restoration, item L, is 100% complete. We had some paperwork that we had to process under the deadlines, and some work that we had to get done in the irrigation system, and paperwork for the irrigation system and closeouts. So we've had some very kind of stringent deadlines that we've had to meet on that. One was December 31st, the other one is January 5th, and we negotiated all the terms and gotten all the paperwork done correctly for those closeouts. So that was a major accomplishment also, and I have to compliment Arian for putting that together. She's done a great job with that, Arian Powell. Moving down, let's see, the Eastern Trails extension. We have met with some of the property owners, and we're planning on meeting with the ditch owners soon to get their input on working with them as far as the location of the trail and how that's going to work. We've made some progress on the wastewater treatment plant and hiring the electrical engineer. And we've just about completed the H&H study, hydrologic and hydraulic study, mapping the floodway through the town. And so that's another accomplishment that's been done, just about done. With home elevations, we've got our bids due January 12th, so that's hopefully we'll have some good bids on that project. That's a challenging project, but hopefully we're going to get good bids on it. And then moving down with the pilot to item Y, the pilot program parks and stream work. We've talked about the rewrite of the version to FEMA, so they are reviewing that now, and that's a great development. We've got an active partner at FEMA that's working with us closely, and so we're answering questions, and they are actually reviewing that now, so that's a positive development. And I guess there's been a couple eagles spotted in the county.
2 golden eagles are back.
So,
If the happy people.
so that's what I had for the board tonight. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Questions? I just have one quick one, it's regarding one of the consent agenda items, but the contract for the oversight for McConnell Bridge, is that going to impact our Dolan funding for staffing, since that would have been a project?
No, it would be,
management position?
no, it will be charged to the project,
Okay, so
directly to FEMA, so it'd be through the,
it doesn't reduce our need for that position in any way?
no.
Okay, good.
No, it's additional, so we actually have a project manager working on that for the town, but this is a specialist that will be on site pretty much full
Okay.
to observe construction
And then,
and observe testing and whatnot.
okay, and actually just back up to the cul-de-sac too on 4th and Evans. I know there's some citizens that are anxious to see that improvement made. So are we still gonna do the cul-de-sac, or are we not gonna do the cul-de-sac, I guess?
Well, we were going to put it, we actually had just a basic roadway repair in the version request. And so we submitted a kind of a request to alter that and add these cul-de-sac and an eyebrow. And it's hard to explain without looking at a picture, but it's basically making the street inaccessible except for emergencies and locals only. And we feel that's the correct direction for the town, since the roadway is not wide enough for 2 cars to pass. and we can't make it any wider because the retaining wall is part of the hydrology of the river, and we can't move the retaining wall, and it's restricted on the other side by property. So the engineers that were hired by the town back when did a lot of studies, and they came up with a cul-de-sac and an eyebrow, basically an emergency drive in between them. So we can, within this version request, what would be funded by FEMA right now is reinforcing the retaining wall, putting a guardrail in, and rebuilding this emergency access road or the curve of the road. We can submit a separate version to them for the cul-de-sac and the eyebrow, or we can look for different, for other funds. Try to get it through HMGP or fund it other ways if we can find other funding for it. So we're not sure exactly how. We're still going to have the objective of getting what the town wants.
We identified a couple of other alternatives. The part about, every time we submit a different version for this, because it's part of a large pilot program, we only have one version left, right? Until the very end. If we submit it now, that project, our PAP, which is $25 million, goes to the bottom of the 200 projects that FEMA's reviewing.
Well, it could.
It
Yeah.
could. That's what they tell us they'll do with it. So instead of doing that, there is $140,000. $135,000 to put the road back, which is a big portion of this anyway. The road will only be put back to be able to handle one car, one direction. So that itself will create some traffic calming. If we can make some form of a grade change right there to the other property, we'll build in a natural speed bump. So, and then signage. And then if we want a formal cul-de-sac, that will require other funding because it was not part of the damaged project originally. But I think we'll be able to build the road rebuild in some improvements as part of that. And then the signage and a more natural speed bump right there. To do what we can versus hold up the $25 million PAP.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be disappointing for some folks who have kind of been under the impression we were gonna do that. And it was still funded, and
Yep.
so this is kind of a bit of bad news for them. So,
Well, I wouldn't say that it's done yet. I think the objective is still there. And so I think, we're looking at how to achieve that objective. We just didn't want to jeopardize the PAP by changing the version, by altering the version at this late date. We put that information in back in November.
I guess I'm not arguing or disagreeing with the decision. I think it sounds like you're doing what you have to do.
Well, there's one other alternative we're looking at, and that is to use the CDBG-DR paving funds to put the cul-de-sac there. You could do that instead of repaving the roads. As we found out throughout this recovery, there's lots of twists and turns, but the full intent is to continue with that project of narrowing that, making it inaccessible to general through traffic, and sign it so that only locals are using it other than emergency vehicles.
So what sort of outreach has been done to appraise people?
This just happened on Friday,
So what's, I guess,
Thursday.
I'll
I haven't
rephrase.
done any yet.
What is the plan to do some outreach?
Actually, the version request was in response to a request by one of the residents. And so I made a kind of a last-ditch effort to change and alter and add on this additional work with FEMA. But they advised us against that, and we feel like we will need, this is the start of it, is to report to the board. And then I think, I'm not sure what we'll do, meet with
Initially,
residents?
we've written an email to the resident that, inquired and told them that the funding source may have to shift. It's still our intent to make the improvements. And these other items now we can move forward with as a separate project and get that bid and done. And hopefully by summer season, we could, maybe have some other funding for the cul-de-sac itself. I think I think some of the same purpose will be met, just want to have the physical cul-de-sac as a separate, like, big curve that you curl around. We hope to address it maybe in some other ways with signage and this grade change right there. And it's say this same purpose, we just can't call it that in the FEMA version because it wasn't identified as a pre-flood feature.
Yeah, I think that will be, I think that'll be acceptable. I think especially if we can start to see some of the work actually get done.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think that would be.
We're planning on executing the work this summer.
Spring, hopefully.
Yeah,
Spring, summer.
But will the signage really work with everyone on their GPSs on their phones and their cars to tell them now to take this route, and Google Maps or whatever doesn't really know that we're trying to narrow the road and slow down traffic. So all it's gonna do is possibly put one heck of a backup on that road again.
Well, we'll definitely slow it down if it's only a one lane.
I'll
Posted
slow
as
it
that.
down.
And if at Third in Evans, it says not a through street, even though, if we put that it's not a through street, local traffic only signage, formal signage. I don't know if you were able to see the article we sent out to you last week, that this is not only a Lyons problem, that there's communities all around the country that are facing mobile applications that are telling people to take side streets, and it's creating problems all around the country. So apparently there are, people are implementing local traffic only, even though it's a public street, and it has yet to be challenged in the courts if that's legal or not to keep people from using that street, but seems to be that this is not isolated to the town of Lyons. Yeah. Evolving. I have two other real quick staff updates, not flood related. We did have our annual Sursa property inspection, and there was one item that is really fairly large that we need to address sooner than later. And that is that they want to see Town Hall have 2 ADA parking stalls. And that is going to create some challenges for us because the area that is closest to the front door for Town Hall are at a grade that we can't put it there because of drainage. And then the other sites are not hard surface. So we're gonna have to come up with a plan. But they are wanting 2 stalls, 1 van accessible and 1 car accessible, to be identified for ADA only. So that's really the biggest, probably the most costliest item that they address. The others are typical items that we find that we can address fairly quickly with, mounting a fire extinguisher at a different height and, not using an extension cord here and there. Those sorts of things, but we will have to, that was not budgeted for this year, and we're gonna have to address it. The other thing we wanted to update the board is that the town did complete its annual inventory that was required by our last audit. So that was conducted a couple weeks ago, both for the enterprise funds and for the general fund and Parks Department. So that is completed, and we'll get documented with our next one.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right, we'll move on to audience business. This is the portion of the meeting where the audience is welcome to address the board on items of interest that are not listed on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. We do have one public hearing on the agenda tonight related to the stormwater utility, which is ordinance 1025. So if you're here to speak for that issue, please wait until the public hearing. Otherwise, the public is welcome to come forward, give your name and address for the record, and each person will be allowed 4 minutes. Anyone here for audience business? Seeing none. go ahead and move on to the ordinances and public hearings and then board and commission updates. First. So the clerk, please introduce the first ordinance.
This will be a public hearing for ordinance 1025, an ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Lyons amending Chapter 13 of the Lyons Municipal Code to enact a new Article 6 concerning the establishment and administration of a stormwater utility enterprise and the imposition of stormwater fees, stormwater utility formation.
All right, is there a staff presentation? Yeah, that would pretty much be.
I mean, it's up to you. I think I can give the overview.
Sure.
So this is the second reading of ordinance directed by the board to establish a stormwater utility enterprise fund to fund stormwater maintenance costs and fund capital improvement projects related to stormwater management. And this particular ordinance sets up a framework to collect a fee and define the uses, permissible uses of that fee. As drafted, it contains certain exemptions for certain types of property, but I believe Mr. Kaplan will be speaking to that in terms of the input from the UEB. This was based on something that's fairly typical of these types of ordinances. And this ordinance just confers all the powers on this fund and enterprise that are required under the Colorado Constitution.
So I didn't know if it was specifically a presentation, right? A lot of this the ordinance was drafted and put out, but the UEB hadn't really had time to review it and go over it. So the UEB has now gone over it, and I just had some of the comments from the Utility and Engineering Board if we wanted to make modifications to that. You know, there was the discussion of the listed exemptions. We felt there needed to be some more discussion on that, you know, to determine, are we going to make, it said agricultural properties, A1 and A2 properties that would be exempted, or are we going to go by zoning? There's agricultural properties that are really just residential properties zoned agriculture. So I don't know that we would want to be going by zoning. What the determinant would be, do we need to have the railroad right of way? It's in there in places, but I don't know that we need to have that. I think a lot of it was maybe redoing a rework of that ordinance. Some of it also, if we look at the current municipal code, sections 2, 3, and 4 are electric, water, and wastewater. Section 5 is about the reduced rates. So it would seem to make more sense to make stormwater section 5 and push the reduced rates to section 6. I don't know how much it matters, but for continuity of the code, of the Lyons Municipal Code versus an ordinance. See, some of it was if we were just talking about creating the stormwater utility, that's one thing, but we're also putting in the actual code that's going to go into the Lyons Municipal Code. Should that follow some of the general outline that the other sections follow? You know, all section 2, section 3, or Article 2, Article 3, and Article 4 all start with so-and-so fund has been created, or so-and-so enterprise has been created as the first subsection. So that was a lot of we had, and there was still the discussion of the rates. That's not in there. That's set to be determined at a later date. So the UEB could go through this and tweak what's there, go through what the ordinance is, what the Lyons Municipal Code already has with regard to the other utilities. We had some questions on if we needed the discussion of creating it as an enterprise fund. Again, the other Article 2 for the electric does not mention anywhere, none of them mention that this is an enterprise fund, certain sections of that. So I guess the UEB's questions were, did we want to make this look more like the other articles that are dealing with the other utilities?
I can respond to that.
Go ahead, sure.
Just if we were going to do any more work on this, my recommendation would be to change the other provisions in the code to more clearly reflect the designation and creation of an enterprise and endow it with the powers that are there, that are inherent in an enterprise, if we're gonna go down that route for consistency.
I was going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on the discussion about exemptions and just kind of why is ag proposed as an exemption? And why would you think it wouldn't have to be?
Well,
What's the
I
reasoning
understand
there?
what Mr. Kaplan is saying, and that's clearly a policy decision that's based on, you know, engineering and scientific data. The general thinking for these types of ordinances is that ag property tends to mostly be pervious as opposed to impervious, and so there's not as much runoff created, therefore not much impact to the system in terms of stormwater management, and that obviously varies by jurisdiction, and in this case, Mr. Kaplan just pointed out that a lot of the ag zone, or many properties within those zones are actually mostly just residential properties, and therefore that might not be the appropriate device by which to exempt properties in this case.
Does the board have other questions for Mr. Kaplan? Regarding the UAB memo? Can you talk a little bit about what research you've done in terms of the rates for establishing an initial rate?
Well, the rate for Lyons was determined more based on, we have a capital improvements plan that has so many items that need to get done, so you can look at the total. There is some variation on that because the capital improvement or the master plan that was put together has various options. So if you have one area, you're gonna pick one of 3 options, so part of the total would depend on that. But previously I went through, if we picked certain options, using those, we would come up with the total amount that would be needed, and then you can determine what you want to use for the rate structure. We had started with a more simplistic idea of you can just use a flat rate and charge $10. Again, previously we were just trying to get a feel for if we wanted to move forward with this, rather than this would all of a sudden be an ordinance that was out there and we were going to go with it as it is. I was under the assumption we were starting this project and that it might take some time to work through. But we looked through a number of different options. You have in the packet, you can see some of the fees that Longmont uses, that Erie, Erie had a flat rate, and based on analysis done a couple of years ago in 2014, they changed theirs to use an impervious square footage. A lot of locations try to determine an average for residential properties and make a flat rate for residential, and then commercial properties, which may have more, impervious square footage, would have a different rate. You can see at Longmont has a residential customer rate, and then they also have a non-residential customer rate based on the surface area. Also then we had Boulder's monthly stormwater there. I had another rate study that was done that we went through in trying to determine some of it. That was after sort of setting the flat rate, and there is some discussion on using impervious area. If we could figure the average, Lyons doesn't have that many parcels of property. With the GPS data out there now, you can get some out there. A counter to that is the idea that was mentioned that I hadn't thought about before. Most of our stormwater is coming from outside of Lyons, right? Most of it is county property that we just have to pass through. It's not a lot of the properties themselves that are causing the stormwater runoff. There may be some, that may be something to take into consideration. If one piece of property or an entire block is just concrete and parking, there's some stormwater runoff there that you wouldn't have from a residential property. But most of it that we're talking about and the concerns in the master plan are coming out of Steamboat Valley, or Red Gulch, or off of above Ewald, which are Boulder County, and so the city residents may all, in aggregate, have the same costs to get that water down. That points more towards a flat rate, because if it's not our own individual properties causing stormwater runoff, but we're trying to get this water from various parts of town to where it needs to be in the creek and not damaging properties, then we could look at the flat rate type structure, at least for residential flat rate, and maybe something else.
Okay. Does the attorney have a comment on the rate question?
Well, in terms of the methodology and the science, obviously that's not my department. From a legal standpoint, it's my opinion that the town would benefit from having an assessment, a study that determined the needs of the town, the priorities of the projects, and determined a rate that was reasonably related to the overall cost of providing the services of the utility. The reasoning for that is to support the idea that that any fee that is imposed by this board is legitimately a fee and not subject to challenge as a tax that did not receive advance voter approval under Tabor. The key is to have a reasonable relation between the fees assessed or imposed and the services provided. And so having some sort of documentation and science to support, or methodology to support how that fee was arrived at, the method by which that fee was arrived, and the reason for its imposition would be my recommendation.
All right, other questions for staff?
On that recommendation, is it possible though, say we enact this and set a $10 fee, to start that right off the bat to begin collecting, showing that we got something on the books, so if we want to go for a bond right away, as we're doing the study and make an adjustment after the study comes out, would that be considered yay, good, bad, ugly, what?
I think it's not as certain that you would be able to, potentially there's some challenges there, I suppose. I cannot speak to a willingness of our creditor to lend on a fee that was established on that basis, but that would be a question I would want to ask. I think it would be most prudent to ensure that that methodology was established in advance of imposing the fee.
Well, if we had already had a stormwater study done, which we did, and the fee is much less than to cover all the items that were listed in that, do you think we'd be at risk of someone coming back and saying that we're overcharging? Is that the concern? You know, because it seems like our fee's not even high enough to cover what's in the stormwater study. So I would think that, you know, would that be where we would be at risk, is if the fee was too high, we're collecting more money than we needed to? Or do you think there's still a risk, even though we're not collecting enough money to cover what's in our study?
I think the main factor is not over or under, but whether or not it's reasonably related, right? So the difference on a spectrum, whether it's more or less, I think practically speaking, if it's over, you're going to have someone scrutinizing it more carefully. But the key would be to have a rational relationship between and I'm not familiar with any prior studies that have been done, so if you wanted me to analyze sort of methodology, or at least start looking into that along with the help of maybe others, then I would need to take the time to do that. But I think you just need to be sure that you have something that shows a reasonable relationship.
Right, we have the capital improvements plan study. We don't have something to determine a rate for the utility.
Okay.
What's the urgency? Is there a timetable urgency for this?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I knew that we wanted to do this early in the year, and so I got the ordinance put together. But I see no hurry from my perspective. In fact, from a legal perspective, I think a little more deliberation and time could be beneficial to the town. There's no reason you can't continue this tonight or pull it and ask for further review and study from my perspective. I don't know about staffs or the town, certainly the needs of the citizens of the town.
And the UEB feels we could do a rate study and put together a formal document. It would still be by the Lyons hearing board if that made any difference, but it would be a documented rate study.
What did we budget?
60,000?
How much?
I thought you'd 60,000. I thought you put somewhere in that there's 60,000 in the general fund for, or that's what would be required next year because there's been no maintenance and things haven't been, there hasn't been as much upkeep as there needs to be with the other priorities the town has had. We were talking, we had thought it would be 25,000 annually for maintenance. So, yeah, we have a capital improvements plan that goes out to what we want to do. We have staff that can give us numbers for the actual maintenance that would be involved. So it's a matter of determining what's equitable to the various ratepayers, right? I think the big concern with the rate study is that it has to be fair. Everyone is supposed to be paying their portion. When you're using electric, you know somewhat how much the electricity is. Although even with that, there is a base fee to cover the entire utility structure, and then there's how much electricity you use, or wastewater, cover the wastewater plant. And then the amount you use. The one other, I know Dan, you had asked before about the rates, if you want the base rates. The last time I was up here, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at it, and if that's important or whatnot, if you wanted to. Other utility base rates?
We were sent something today.
Okay.
What is the legal opinion of an internal rate study to determine how reasonably related the services are?
It's something I have not known that to be the case for entities, but I haven't, quite frankly, I haven't surveyed. Typically, an independent consultant, I think, would be most beneficial in terms of a justification for the fee. For the, sheer sake of the value of independent analysis on its own. That's not any slight on anybody that's doing any of the work. It's clear to me that the UAB is most familiar with these issues and the matters at hand. I can look into that further if you'd like to see if we know of anyone in our, our firm has served or that has gone with internal services as opposed to external.
To clarify, we have $40,000 in the budget for the stormwater fund this year.
What would be staff's recommendation relative to next steps?
I think there's a couple things we could do. One would be to reach out to see if there is some technical assistance we could get to look at our fee study, our proposed fee schedule. I believe the Department of Local Affairs has some technical assistance. I know they offer it for water and sewer, so they might offer it also for stormwater. That'd be one step. The second could be to put out, we could at least do an RFP on what it would cost to do a rate study, I guess. See what that comes in at, if that seems reasonable. To me, and I guess this would be legal, would be, I firmly believe that any study is going to show we should be collecting more than $10 a month. So if you wanted to implement that now, I think it is reasonable, and I think it has been somewhat studied through our capital improvement program, or our capital improvement plan, the number of residents. There's a basic figure that would justify that until you could get a formal study done. But it may mean you have to change the rate then. If it comes back and says you should be charging $20 a month, then what?
Then we amend the ordinance.
Well, but I mean, I don't know that they're ready to implement that.
Right.
So I think you have to bring that into reasonableness too, is what's your tolerance of implementing new rates for the public? Are you going to implement what an independent study might say you need to do?
The other question is, and this would probably be for legal, which is, have other communities run into issues related to a commercial charge that ends up one or two businesses bear a higher rate, and everybody else is paying a flat rate.
Yes, in fact, how these properties are put into rate categories is often a source of controversy. Can be nonprofits, can be businesses that are bearing a greater load. Obviously, it depends on the independent characteristics of that specific community, but yes.
Which is, to some extent, a flat rate for each parcel, based on the fact that each parcel in town bears the same amount. Getting the water from outside of town to the creek was one
idea
thought that I like to look at. Makes things seem reasonable.
Yeah, given that, to me, you know, passing an ordinance now that we have several possibilities for the need to rewrite or maybe restructure, wouldn't make sense until we have an understanding of the rate framework that we want, and there may even be implications for other elements in the ordinance because of that. And I don't know.
Well, we have a public hearing scheduled, so I think I'm going to go ahead and say we've had some good discussion. Let's open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak to ordinance 1025?
Hi, Laverne Johnson, 306 Evans Line. I came to speak on this because when I was trying to read all those things on the internet, I got that it was going to be $15, and I determined that was way too high, but I didn't read that that was Boulder's charge. So I think it's a waste of money to do a rate study. We need it, and so what if it's $20? You can't charge all these old folks $20. I can see where $10 is reasonable. So, and we need it. I think you should pass it, charge the $10, start collecting, and let the utilities board refine it, because it is needed. I don't know what you're going to do with the county when all their water runs into our town, but at least, you know, at least you'll be starting it. So that's my opinion, and I would say that $10 was plenty. You have like 300 houses of limited income or more, and so you have to consider that. Our water and sewer is high, like about $86 a month, and so, you know, people can only pay so much. So thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Coco Gordon, 523 Fifth Avenue, and also on the engineering board, but talking privately myself. And when I was considering another enterprise versus taking money out of the general fund, I thought it's just very logical to have something more steady to count on rather than a general fund, which we never know if you're going to have enough money to cover things that really have to be done. And we did do the rate study that showed a tremendous amount of projects. So that I think even a minimal amount makes a lot of sense. And I thought of it as a private person that owns a house in town. How do I feel about that, having that kind of a cost? And I thought for $10, I think that whether it comes from the budget in the town, which I'm getting taxed from the tax that I'm paying for the town, or it comes from something that I know is going to be there to help just repair what was done in the past. We're not even talking about things that happen in the future, because it's things that happened during the flood. I just thought it makes a lot of sense to have something there that we can count on. At least we can decide what projects can be done to start. So that's my thought. I don't know about the legal parts or what you have to do, but if you're gonna use your logic in this, it makes sense that if we're in a bowl, all the water's coming from up above, and we're just a nice bottom of the bowl. So think about that. Thank you.
Anyone else for audience, or for the public hearing? All right, we'll close the public hearing. All right, I'll turn it over to the board for discussion and thoughts on how to proceed. Anyone want to start?
My thought is that I think a lot of good, great work has been done. I personally would feel more comfortable with it if the UEB were comfortable with it and comfortable with the amount of time they've had to work on it and make recommendations. So from that perspective, while I agree that we need it and we should move along, that both because the comfort level of the UEB and the validation, if you will, of an independent third party for the relationship of the fee to the costs, that we should continue this until that work has been done.
Okay, others?
I guess I take a different view. I think the UEB has looked at this and has recommended $10 from way back when, and feels comfortable with that. Feels comfortable with the method of allocating, the fees per, unit, rather than per impervious property. And I don't think we're going to find out that much more. We'll just spend a lot of money on a study. I guess I would ask council, what would happen if we started this and someone does launch, to contest it? What would happen at that point in time? Would the town have to give back all the money, or just refund all the money to our ratepayers?
I haven't analyzed that, but if it were challenged and determined to be a tax that was adopted without any other approval, there was a potential for a refund.
Yes. So in my mind, I see that as very unlikely to happen, especially if it's a low amount. And I would be more for just passing it right now. Then we'll have a sense, I think within the next few months, before we spend a lot of money on whether or not someone's going to try to contest it. And I think it'd be harder, I'm not a lawyer, but I would think it might be harder to contest it, years down the line. And that we might be able to, come up with a study at that point if it was really decided it was needed. The only other thing I'm concerned about is the items that Aaron, was talking about, consistency, the structure, the consistency with other stuff in the code. I can almost see delaying it for that purpose, just to look at that. But I wouldn't, before delaying it for rate study, or unless we were able to do something inexpensive one. I don't want to spend a whole lot of money on a rate study that I don't really think is needed,
I was, based on my question with the attorney earlier, that's kind of where I'm with Trustee Kerr, is more money spent on another rate study. We've done quite a few already. As you know, I've said before, I'm of the flavor of getting moving forward, get going. If we need to make adjustments, you make adjustments. Sometimes I put a little more burden on staff to make those adjustments. But at the $10 rate that we've heard bounce around for quite a while, with this issue, I don't think I wouldn't want to go above that at this time at all, and get an ordinance on the books and let's get going. We still have a lot of work to do. And just delaying it for a study. How long do the rate studies usually take, Aaron? Do you have any ideas?
I don't know if it wouldn't be as hard as the capital improvement study. So I don't know how long they delayed those. I would think I could do the study in a couple of weeks, but I've done a lot on this lately, so.
To hire, it would be a minimum of 3 months with the RFP, the bids, doing the work, bringing it back. I mean, it would, 3 months, I think would be.
So we could possibly miss the start collecting June 1st. As was, I think was it mentioned in the original, it would begin, the passive would start collecting June 1, 2018?
That's the way it's currently drafted.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just as a point of clarification, I did not recommend a rate study. I recommended validation of the relationship. That's all. That could be done in a variety of ways, which it could include, I think, the technical assistance from DOLA, just saying that, in effect, saying they've looked at it and it does seem to have a good relationship, so that we have some independent verification and observation.
Thank you.
I want to clarify, I think I just said something about the June 1 date. You may have been referring to the lodging?
Did
I
I
think that's
confuse them?
what you're referencing.
I may have.
Yeah, okay. So there's not a specific
Okay,
date.
thank you
in this
very
one.
much.
Yeah.
I think the only thing would be that we did budget a certain amount in the budget, assuming that we would probably pass some things.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment? Trustee?
I agree with Trustee Kerr and Trustee Carabas. I think, you know, we have the stormwater master plan. There's a lot of evidence and numbers out there about the cost of the capital improvements that we need to do. I don't think $10 is enough, but I think it's a good start. I think it's reasonable. I think it's something that the general public can afford, and I feel ready to move forward. I think we can do those validations and look at the rates more closely, but I just think we need to get started on this and move forward. It's evident to me that it's a big issue, whether you're looking at the master plan or the capital improvement plan, or if you're just walking the streets of Lyons. It's clear that we need to get moving on this, so.
We budgeted 66,000 in revenue for this year, so we can maybe work that out. Find out when that was intended to start, to see if we can figure that out by household.
One question, I guess I didn't look back exactly in the ordinance. How are we determining who pays? Like, is it a parcel? Do we have properties that don't have any residences on them? Or like the utilities, you have the utility connection, so you know who's going to pay.
Well, the way this is drafted has some exemptions, which sort of take some folks out of the picture, and then the rest would be a rate set by a resolution based on a rate study. And that rate study or rate sheet could define those separate categories: residential, non-residential, all, zones, however. I mean, that was the intent here, is to get the structure in place. And one methodology by which you could impose the fee. It's not the only one, obviously. You can also put that straight in the ordinance.
Okay,
Right,
I'm
what
gonna
do you
turn
think
the
the
floor
parcel
over to Trustee. I know we have a lot of questions. Let me let everybody speak first, and then we'll come back. Go ahead.
I think this board needs to be the board that gets this going, because we've done the most work on this. And I'm okay with, based on the public testimony, $10 is seen as reasonable. I think we need to remove the exemptions for the agricultural zones for the reasons stated by the UEB chair. I wonder, my question is, do we need to exempt town park property or not? Not that we need to, but if we don't exempt town property, does the town have to pay the utility?
Yeah, you can exempt town park property, and whether or not you need to or want to is.
Well, what I mean is, otherwise, is the town obligated?
Yeah, it would.
Okay.
Yeah, but right now, it is, does not include park property. It includes other public property, or excludes other public property.
Right, and how would, so my question would be, if we did not exempt park property, has anyone figured out how much the town would owe the utility? The Parks Department would owe the utility, or is it just $10? Because
For each property.
If that's how you said it.
okay. So I think that, to me, the flat fee makes the most sense. Because it makes sense that essentially trying to calculate impervious property and doesn't really seem to make sense for us. I also think it's pretty clear that we have a significant list of things to do. And it's quite clear why we're doing this. And so that we can start to tackle this huge need that the town has. So I would support moving forward with this as long as we have a rate that goes with it. And I'd also would support removing the ag exemptions, because I think the chair is correct in his assessment of that.
All right, so I guess to some of the questions or concerns, I guess that you have, I guess I feel like we have been talking about this for a really long time. Saying this is something we want to get done, and I realize it may not be perfect in terms of how it's structured. I actually like the structure of it more than I like the structure of some of the other. So I would defer actually to the town attorney to say at some point, and I don't think it's a high priority at all right now, because I think it's good language to be in here, and I'd kind of go more toward the others should have a lot of this language in it versus taking it out to make these look like the others. So I think it's a little more complete and really outlines what an entity like this does and has the right to do. So I actually would like not to delay it, to change it and reformat it. I'd like to spend more time on the others as those come up. I guess the other thing is, I think that anyone would have a hard time saying this is an unreasonable fee based on the quantity of work. And I think the studies that we've had done just illustrate how much storm damage this town is at risk for if we don't start doing something. And we've already seen that in some of the recent hailstorms. In some of the properties over on Seward, I've been to personally, and on Kelling, that just have massive amounts of damage related to storm. And we're not going to even come close to fixing these problems with this initial ordinance. I think the way I'm looking at this is maybe thinking of this as an initial base fee and nothing more, just a base fee that we're going to build on over time, and we may need to do some additional studies down the road. But I would also say that if you look at how we've determined all of our other rates, we have relied on the UEB almost exclusively for those, with an occasional outside consultant from time to time to do a more comprehensive look. But this is kind of a precedent that we've relied on the UEB's analysis, and I think I'm comfortable with setting an initial fee based on a recommendation that's very simple, that everyone can understand, that every parcel in town is going to pay a flat, just base fee, so we can get started with some of these minor things that the town could actually do on their own. So I do think we can defend this. I think if we started to get more complicated and charge some people much higher rates than others, then I do think we would be kind of potentially setting ourselves up for some flack from some folks who would come in and say, wait a minute, why am I getting charged this much? You explain it to me. So I think what we're doing is reasonable, and I agree. I would hate to kick this to a brand new board. This is a lot of work that's gone into it this far. I would also agree with removing ag. And then I had one additional question about the use of the Stormwater Utility Fund, where it describes in the first section of 13.650 that the fund shall be used only to pay the costs of construction, operation, and maintenance of the stormwater system. My question would be, could this also acquire property if it was deemed needed for retention?
I think that would fall into the category of operation and construction. I mean,
Okay.
you need to acquire property to put facilities on, and yeah, I think that falls.
It seems to be somewhat of an inherent right of an
Yeah.
enterprise that you can do that, but I
Yeah.
didn't know if it needed to be stated specifically in that section.
We can say that, but I think it's inherent within operation
Okay,
as well.
if you're comfortable with it, I just, in light of our recent need to acquire property
Good
to do
question.
operations,
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was necessary to carve that out. Because I mean, we don't know that, with most of our problems being in the county, we may end up, who knows what the future holds, with needing to work with them on a project here or there that they deed, property or something. So, I think that overall, I think it's a very thorough ordinance and gets us at least the structure in place that we need. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to create it and then not start collecting fees. So my preference is to move forward with it tonight. It sounds like there's enough support to do that. Because I just think, it's a year away from being implemented at minimum if we don't. And I do think the public understands the need for it. So I'm in favor of moving forward. I do think we would need in the motion to revise section 13660, taking out the section that says the amount of such fee shall be set by the Board of Trustees and a fee schedule adopted by resolution. We set all of our utility rates by ordinance, and that is how all the other ordinances are structured. One section of the ordinance has the fee in it. So to be consistent, we would want to probably here, after it says there's hereby imposed on each customer stormwater utility fee, replacing that next sentence with something along the lines of the fee shall be imposed in accordance with the following schedule. One, each parcel, will pay $10 or something along those lines. I don't know if you have.
Well, can I interject? I mean, you have two options. One is to, which is what we often do here, is direct some amendments to the ordinance and pass it with the amendments as discussed. Or you can ask us to work together to make those revisions and continue this public hearing. And then we will bring it back to you at the next meeting, and you will get to see what that looks like. It's up to you. I don't know how much, I just wanted to be sure that you knew that that was an option as
Sure.
well. So
I just think that's the section where
13660 is really the only one, and just, you're saying hereby imposed on each customer a stormwater utility fee set, by the following, in the following manner in A, just 13660A is what you want to change. And then some revisions to the exemptions, including removing the ag.
Right, can I just mention, unless I have an older one, my exemptions is section, is part D, and should that be part B? It's just going ahead. Right, I don't know, I have
We can.
13660A, and then the next one says D.
Oh, that was.
I don't have a B or C.
That was a typo probably
That's
from another
what I
version.
thought.
It's been corrected.
And then, right, to define customer was my concern before when I
I
was
think
saying.
that's defined at the top of the code, at the top of this chapter, and that's why that definition is omitted. Can verify that.
Owner of a
There's
record
different
of a lot.
customers, different utilities have different customers.
Here, Aaron, it's defined as the owner of record of a lot, tract, or parcel of land within the town boundaries.
Oh,
It's in the actual ordinance, yeah, it's consumer that's in the main part.
I don't have page 1 for whatever reason. Oh, here it is.
Yep, it is defined here in the ordinance, correct. All right, so 13660 A and B.
So I think we, at this point, are looking for a motion from the board on how they want to proceed.
I move that we approve ordinance 1025 with the following changes. In section 13660, part A, remove the language referring to adopting fee schedule by resolution, and adding language that rates will be determined by ordinance. This language can be written by staff.
So you're not gonna put the $10 in this one, you're going to have a separate ordinance?
Well, that's how it looks in the other.
Okay.
When I look at the other,
Okay.
they have their own section, so
Okay.
I'm about to ask you for some advice there.
Okay.
I'd also would further move that add the language to 13660B1, where it says all public highways, streets, roadways, sidewalks, bike paths, and all town-owned property to that sentence, and continue and other public rights of way and so on. Further move to remove B2 and make B3 B2. Let's see. And then I would like some advice on how to put in a section, or where that section would be 13.690.
On the ordinance?
Yeah.
Or you could just do a 13.660C.
Okay. Further move that we add section C to part C to section 13.660, setting the rate as a fee of $10 per customer, I think is the word that's used in these ordinances. And my understanding is that this allows the fee to be adjustable by essentially amending any board can amend the ordinance in the future.
And it's $10 per customer per month?
Correct.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
After it gets seconded, I think you can.
I'll second your motion. Just moving the fee prior to the exemptions. So A would be the fee set by ordinance, B would be here's what the fee is, and C would be the exemptions.
Does the legal have an opinion on, does that matter to you?
Nope.
Okay, then I accept that.
Just a little activity.
That's fine.
Can I ask a question, or?
Well, we have a motion and a
Discussion?
second and a friendly amendment, so
It's been accepted.
Oh, yeah.
it's
So
been
now we're-
accepted, so we can have final discussion.
I have a, I guess, a friendly amendment, suggested amendment, to add a whereas clause. Whereas stormwater runoff has caused negative health and safety impacts on public and private properties in the town. comma. So I looked at the whereas clauses, it never said anything like that.
Would you mind restating that briefly?
Whereas stormwater runoff has caused negative health and safety impacts on public and private properties in the town.
Okay.
Is there a second for the amendment?
Well, it's a friendly amendment?
I think
Would you like that
it's a
to be an
significant
amendment?
one. I think we should just have it as a separate
I'll
amendment.
second that.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment?
Well, I have discussion on his amendment.
Well, I think that was
Are
a
we
minor.
on trustee Drysdale?
We're just
Yes,
gonna
we're
do his
on-
as a
yes,
separate
we're on
amendment.
We're on his amendment now.
We're just on his amendment.
So if you have discussion on it, you should talk.
Well, I have discussion on trustee
Yes,
Greenberg's
we will come back.
amendment.
So, well,
We'll
I
come back
don't,
to that
okay.
that was let's vote on this and then we'll come back to that.
unless it impacts your.
All we're doing is voting on whether or not
Okay,
trustee
as a
Drysdale's whereas gets
We
included.
didn't.
I decided not to treat
No,
this as
because
a friendly
that was
amendment.
friendly.
And honestly, I've learned that you shouldn't treat friendly amendments any different than regular amendments. I don't know why they call them friendly, because they're really not.
All I have to say they all.
Anyway, that's all,
I guess it
different
didn't
topic.
change the wording.
Okay, so
So
any
voting-
discussion on the addition of the whereas clause? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote on that amendment. Okay, that passes 6-0. I'll turn the discussion over to trustee Wall.
Okay, so the piece where you're exempting the town from paying the utility, I'm okay with that, except that I still want the town to be accountable for what that cost is. So, we've had so many discussions with Parks and Rec about what's the maintenance cost when you bring this irrigation system online, for example. And we never know what that is because we're not technically paying it. So I just want some way to account for the town's cost, whether it's an actual fee to the town or not. Really for every utility, but since we're talking about this one. So I don't really know how to deal with that. maybe it's just an action item versus any change to the, I don't think it's an ordinance change.
So here would be my, I guess I'll answer in a way, because I think I understand the sentiment you're getting at, is that, you know, we've got, the town is a utilizer of our utilities, and we haven't always tracked it or had the town paying into utilities at the same rate necessarily. To me, I see this as an initial step as a base fee, and it's a minimal amount, and I think that we're probably going to, over time, as we want to do larger projects, or whatever, I think we may institute different fee structures where, you know, again, most of our town property is I would imagine, mostly impervious, not all wet, or pervious, I'm sorry. So I'm not as concerned about that in this particular case, so just, that's why I'm okay with that exemption right now, because we're really just talking about a base fee per parcel, so it's not a significant amount of money that we'd be asking to waive. But if we got more sophisticated and started looking at, you know, how much impact is a particular parcel generating based on what's on it, then I think the town could have parcels that would need to be charged at a different, higher rate, potentially.
And the way I view it is, you know, the other town charges for electric, sewer, water, you know, they're kind of at the wholesale rate. To kind of pay for, you know, just, you know, the base cost that other, you know, utility owners are gonna have to pay. Well, in this case, that's not the case. There is no, you know, base, you know, we're not, you know, no one's consuming anything. It's just all construction. So I see it as a little bit different from other utilities having to pay to the town.
I also see it as our general fund and our parks fund are funded by sales tax. And I think the residents expect that our sales tax goes to those places. And then so for us to reroute sales tax to another fund, I think is not necessarily how our residents expect us to be managing their money. And so that's why I think town land would be exempt, because we're essentially rerouting their money to a different fund. And so I don't think that makes sense. But I agree with the idea of understanding what are our true costs.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with all of that. I think it's actually outside of this discussion that we delve into that further, but thank you.
And I have a simple answer, but I'm in your thing, so I can't speak.
Other discussion, trustee Carroll?
Count the number of parcels times it by 10, and that's the lost cost.
As trustee Drysdale brought up about validation, do you want to have an action item, should this pass, that the UD do his 3-day or 3-week, what was it? Start just to validate something and have staff still look at Dolan to see what they've got out there, if anything, just to have it piggybacking on? Does that need to be just an action item that has to come after we vote on this, or to make it part of it? That's a question
Are you suggesting that?
I'm just asking, as trustee Drysdale brought that up, if anyone on board has an opinion either way, to be in the actual ordinance, or just ask as an action item. Okay.
I would have no objection to that myself. Nothing else.
No, I think it makes sense to have it as separate from the motion, however.
That's what I was asking.
All right, any further discussion on the primary motion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And it passes 6-0. Trustee Carabas, did you want to offer your suggestion or direction to staff?
Sure. You want that as a motion or just an action item?
I think we had nods, so maybe we can move forward.
That we follow up with UEB to do a validation of rate study as they've done in the past. And that staff work with DOLA, find out, as you mentioned earlier, that they've done the studies on the rates. If they have this, great, that we have it in a pack or available.
I'm gonna say technical assistance, because if it's not DOLA, it might be the Regional Association or something.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. Will the clerk please read the items on consent into the record?
Resolution 2017-135, a resolution approving the lease of town-owned property with Telluride Bluegrass Festival for the 2018 Rocky Grass Festival. Resolution 2017-136, a resolution approving the lease of town-owned property with Telluride Bluegrass Festival for the 2018 Folks Festival. Resolution 2018-1, a resolution designating the original public notice location and official newspaper of general circulation for the town of Lyons, Colorado. Resolution 2018-3, a resolution approving a professional service agreement with SPS Environmental LLC for sampling and analysis of the town's sewer collection system. Resolution 2018-5, a resolution awarding the bid for the Lyons Valley River Park in-stream restoration flood recovery construction project, and to approving a construction agreement with Colt and Still Corporation. Resolution 2018-6, a resolution awarding the bid for construction observation services for construction of McConnell Bridge 2 and approving a professional service agreement with Loris and Associates. First reading, ordinance 1026, an ordinance of the town of Lyons adopting a new Article 10 to Chapter 4 of the Lyons Municipal Code, imposing a lodging excise tax for the town of Lyons effective June 1st, 2018, if approved by the registered voters of the town of Lyons at the election to be held at April 3rd, 2018, and the December 2017 accounts payable.
All right, would anyone like to pull any items from consent?
I'd like to pull item 2.
Any others? I'd like to pull item number 1. All right, is there a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. And it passes 6-0. Thank you. All right, general business. We have one item on the agenda, discussion and direction to staff from the workshop.
Oh, before we did we skip the radar?
We did, I forgot it, but you know what, we'll just put it. We'll move it to the next agenda. It is. It's okay. You still have 2 weeks to do your radar test. All right. That's true. I can do it. I'll do it at trustee reports. Thank you. All right. Turning it over to staff. Start the discussion.
At the workshop tonight, we had an overview of some of the influence issues and concerns we're having at the wastewater treatment plant, specifically involving what's called BOD, biochemical oxygenated demand. And that is caused by different products, organics, going through the wastewater plant, including fats, oils, greases, sugars, and other organic materials. So Town Engineer Kubala gave a presentation, and we discussed some of the steps that might be used to resolve or to start mitigating the amount of BOD going into the system.
So are you looking, what specific direction, I guess, are you looking for?
I think we got more than enough at the workshop. And you approved the testing in the consent agenda, so I think we're okay.
Okay, does the board have any additional comments we want to make, since we don't officially make recommendations during workshop? So I think maybe, do we want to just have a motion summarizing the action steps?
I can listen.
Or do we just give direction to staff that says, in effect, to execute based on the discussions during the workshop?
Sure.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion?
Yeah, all I would say as part of the conversation was working with local businesses and some various ways to help businesses come into compliance. I would ask that whatever that you work with local business, that if we're gonna have a pre-treatment ordinance, that we work with the local businesses to make sure that what's in the ordinance includes implementable things. Rather than putting in requirements in our pre-treatment ordinance that businesses simply can't execute either due to cost or just given the age of the infrastructure of many of the buildings in town where certain things are just not possible to do. So this way, I think if we work in conjunction with the businesses to create aspects of the pre-treatment ordinance, we're much more likely then to get the type of relationship between town and businesses that you discussed during the workshop.
Any other comments? I guess the only thing I would like to add is that we put a timeline on this, because I think I'm really just concerned about the impact this could have on the EDA grant. So I think too, this board has had a lot of, education on this topic as well. So, I mean, I would like to see just an action plan brought to the board by the first week meeting in March for approval. And if it's ready, a draft ordinance that this board could consider in March as well. So I think the target, and set a target also for the town to maintain a BOD of less than 500 ongoingly as part of our action plan. That's what the action plan would accomplish. And I understand it may not be able to be implemented, by the end of March, but it sounds like, we need to be on top of this so that we can keep our EDA project moving. So that would be my suggestion as well. All right, I think there's a motion and a second on the floor. So if there's no further discussion, we'll call for the vote. And it passes 6-0. Would you guys like to take that short recess a bit early before we start the next agenda items, or wait? Keep going? Okay, we do have people in the audience, so, okay, we'll keep going. So the first item removed from consent agenda is item number 1. So I was just curious from staff why the contract format changed so drastically from the first time we saw it to the second submission.
I can explain that. In talking to Attorney Gunthenberg, the way it was...
I'm sorry, I missed the...
Oh, the question?
Yes.
So, in talking to the attorney, the way the language is written in, I want to say section 5, which was given out.
7?
7?
It's basically the lease structure, the payment structure.
Right. So it changed because, and I have to look at where it is, sorry.
Well, overall, you're talking about that one paragraph and the payment?
Yeah, section 7.
Yeah.
So the way we had read it was that the language was 50% of the maximum, and because of the change with the farm being in play and reading the language, that we wanted to put a minimum amount number in it, but then in further discussions with the attorney and Plant Bluegrass, that the reporting had always been historically for 50% of the attendees, not for the maximum. So even though we had saved or expected 800 campers, they give us a report every year of exactly how many they had. And so, for example, I think for last year it was 682, so then that's what they paid for. So then, when we met with them again about the language, we established at least a minimum and a maximum that they both, that we were comfortable with and they were comfortable with. Does that?
I think what I'm gathering, in the prior version that you saw that was postponed to this, there was a requirement, at least in Rocky Grass, that we get a maximum on the idea of the theory that there was an opportunity cost, right? The town had this property and it was giving exclusive use to this private entity for use. And therefore, because this private entity had other parking, that the town would be sacrificing some, if not all, you know, of its parking on its property, and that to guarantee a certain amount of revenue for the town would make sense in one, you know, from one viewpoint. But contracts are about, and leases are about mutual expectations and agreements, and so when that, I think that was contested by the lessor in this, or lessee in this case, and so we arrived at a different formula.
Can you share kind of what the typical payment has been historically? Annually? The past 3 years on average?
It's based on this formula. So the projections that I made were based on this formula minus the parking for this year.
This formula that's in here.
Basically straight 50%.
Yes, the formula that's in the lease currently. That's
So the number that was in the prior version?
No, the lease that's before you right now. We've always received 50% of the actual number.
Right, I'm asking what did the town earn? How much dollars did we actually get the last 3 years on average, roughly?
It's been broken out into parking and camping separately, but for between the two festivals, it's been anywhere between $38,000 and $45,000 off of the top of my head.
Okay, so the minimum amount in here would have been, that was in the contract was actually much less than what the town has actually realized.
Excuse me, I'm sorry?
Like the first version had, I'm just looking at the Folks lease that we got last time, and it had a minimum lease payment of $18,000 for Folks Fest. I didn't look up.
And I think it was almost 30 for that.
And it was about 30, so I guess I thought that was actually a pretty reasonable thing for the town to have a minimum guaranteed amount, since we're now booking out so far in advance with the online reservation system, and if we're holding that week and not booking it, not saying that something's going to happen or whatever, but you know, a minimum guaranteed amount doesn't seem like a bad thing to have in the contract if they're already paying over that anyway on average. So if it's less, as long as it's less than what our average has been. I guess I would like to hear what the objection was. I know we have Brian's in the audience, if you want to come up. We'll let you provide some input.
You can go sit down so you can be more comfortable.
Do that.
There's a
Got
mic
my
right
laptop
here.
and one.
Light. Slide over.
That was from the host, by the way. The number,
Sorry if we put you on the spot there.
the number I quoted you, by the way, was a combined for both.
Right.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And I can go get those numbers.
Why don't you go?
I have some.
Oh, you have them?
Why don't you get yours? Brian Eister, 215 Welch with Planet Bluegrass. Can you guys hear me okay?
You can take it over there. You don't have to lean. Okay.
So there were two kind of situations. The Rocky Grass one didn't actually specify a minimum. That one just said we have 800 people there. And that was just a little too aggressive for us. We haven't actually had 800 in the Vern Johnson Park since, I think we've actually only had that a couple of years ever. So we just kind of looked at average numbers here. I can give you the average number of people we've had. Kind of thinking pre-flood, because that's when we had the entire area available to us. Yeah, so about 750 has been the average number of people we had prior to the flood, and so we just picked 700 as a reasonable minimum number that we're comfortable with. We just weren't comfortable with that 800 number as being both the minimum and the maximum. And so the current draft that you see of the Rocky Grass one has a minimum of 700 and a max of 800. The previous one only had a minimum value for the Folks Fest lease. And I know that's a different item, so I don't know if we want to talk about Folks as well now, or just Rocky Grass.
Let's just take them one at a time since they're separate resolutions. So Rocky Grass is the one we're currently talking about. Now, I was just kind of curious why the provision about the minimum payment came out altogether, because the original version had a minimum payment of $29,742, and that was based on, is that based on the 800? Or
Yes.
staff based that on 800, and they thought that number was high,
To set that as a minimum.
as a minimum payment.
So then in
Okay,
the discussions, we agreed that we would set a minimum of 700, so now we know we'll at least get half of 700 campers, all of the RVs and the vehicles, up to a maximum of 800 campers, which is what we have allowed for.
Yeah.
And then just to answer your question, Connie, looking back, in 2009, there were 845, 2010, 755, 2011, 773, 2012, 764, 2013, 775. So I think we all feel like we're in the range. And Brian and I had a good conversation about it. So I think when I read the language, that it seemed different, that we hadn't been enforcing this bare minimum. But perhaps maybe for 2019, we think about a different way to do it than based on number of campers, like on a
Just at least the park.
park at the other.
Yeah, kind of the cost of the facility.
okay. I guess instead of just taking that out completely, why you just didn't negotiate maybe a lower number as a minimum payment? But I think what we're looking at now is that we have a lot of demand, and we have the ability to actually guarantee that revenue for the town much in advance. And so with this, we don't know what the plan is for the camping area. And my understanding is you're not using the new property yet for camping in 2019 or 2018?
We're using it for rocky grass in the same way that we used Bone Park in the past.
For parking.
So, well, and camping as well, but
And
we're
some
capping that at
camping.
300.
Okay.
Which is about the same number that we had done in the past.
I mean, I think what's changed this year is that for me,
Sure.
because that means now that you have obviously other options for camping, and it could reduce the number of campers for this park. And so we're guaranteed 50% of whatever you get, but we're not guaranteed to necessarily cover our capacity that we could have generated on our own, is the way I look at this. And I know this has been a very beneficial arrangement in the past, and it has worked well for both sides, I would argue. But I think as circumstances change, we have to reevaluate our agreement. And so I just wanted to understand kind of why it shifted.
And I think I was going where you were in terms of it's beneficial, but things have changed. But in the discussion with Brian and Planet Bluegrass, it was, could we look at it for 2019? Because so much has changed with their property, our online reservation system, and everything. And so the difference really between 700 minimum and 800 would be 100 times 30 for the town from a revenue standpoint. So, and I think the hope is that we would meet those maximums and get it close to 800. That's what
Are you? Yeah, I don't think it's the understanding that anything less than 700 will be paid, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll still meet our historical amounts.
Okay.
And in my conversations with Brian and Planet Bluegrass, I don't think that it's their want to have any less campers there than they've had in the past, or to discontinue the use of Laverne Johnson Park, unless that's our intent to do something different there, based on their new property, because they know it's popular for their festival goers.
But am I reading this correctly? I don't read that there's any minimum amount the town is guaranteed in this contract.
There is,
No, there's not.
That was our intent.
That was our intent.
But that
Minimum of
doesn't say-
700, maximum of 800.
But it just talks about accommodating
It
700.
says accommodations, but the lease payments, there is not a set minimum.
Right, it doesn't say there's a guarantee that the town will receive 50% of 700 campers regardless of the number of campers.
That's the capacity that they're entitled to, and then
I think that was it.
7 is just leave it like this, 50% of total gross revenues.
That's the way I read it. So
That's
if
the
you
way it
intended
was-
it to read differently, it doesn't read that way.
No, that's the way it was.
So-
I understood the direction was to write it, to go back to.
But your intent is that you're gonna be selling 700 tickets.
We're fine with having 700 be the floor, or, you know, the minimum amount that we.
We can do that. We haven't been.
So I would like to propose just continuing this one more meeting and letting you guys go back and work that out. I'm not gonna be pushy about what you decide is a reasonable number, but I do think that the town needs to start kind of guaranteeing our revenue. I mean, we have budgets we have to meet as well and they're aggressive for our park system, and so, you know, I'm confident we'll meet it, and we want it to be a fair and reasonable number, and I don't care if it's based on camper numbers or a dollar figure, but I liked that in there, as it made me kind of feel good about, we're not gonna, you know, we have some guarantees so that we can continue the relationship too, knowing you have new options available. That was my concern. So I don't know if the board is in agreement with that or not.
Well, that was your intent, right? You're selling those.
Yeah, exactly.
Number of
Could we
tickets, right?
modify
Conversation was
it?
that.
Yeah, that's what I.
The language, I don't know, because Kathy's here, if we can do it with putting in this sentence on number 7, that which shall be 50% of the gross revenues generated from camping, parking, and recreational vehicle parking at the leased property, based on at least the minimum
At least 700 campers.
in 2C and the maximum in 2C.
I think a little more time, since we've already, might be better for all parties, because the way the prior version of this was drafted as an exact guaranteed amount, I think for making sure that the parties' expectations are all the same, it's better to have as much specificity as possible. And if we can arrive at that, why not take a little, I mean, is that gonna hamper any booking or timing? I guess I don't know if there's any urgency to not go to the next meeting, make sure that we have some actual dollar amount and clarity in here the way it's been directed.
It would have to, well, if you want me here, it would be on, for me, February 5th.
Well, the other thing I don't know if there were other changes made between the two versions other than 7A.
Mostly, substantively, I believe it was.
Okay, because I was gonna say, you could simply change the number to reflect 50% of 700 instead of 800. I mean, if that's really the formula
As a minimum.
that you use.
As a minimum, as a
Right.
floor.
I mean, you could say the lease property and it has reservations for 800 there, if the 50% is based on that number for the 24,000, if you change that to 700 and put the new number in there, that would work if you were okay with that version, but I don't want to make you agree to that version, Brian, if you guys want some time to take a look at that.
That's what we all agreed to from discussing it in spirit of, you know, if it's 650, you guys are gonna pay 700 for
Right.
campers. If it's 762, they'll pay 762. So that's where we got to that. But I understand what you're saying now is the language doesn't reflect that. This language, I think on this contract is much more similar to the language we've had probably for the last, what?
From the previous versions.
I mean, years, yeah.
Agreed,
Yeah.
but I think again, that there's different capacity for camping outside of this area, and I'm not challenging or saying I don't believe you when you say this is still gonna be I think this is a desirable property, but the problem is if, I don't know, you know, I think it doesn't hurt to put a new structure in place that we can build on going forward, because we are not going to book this property for that week, and we displace a lot of campers for that week, you know, for this. I think it's worked well for both parties, so that would just be my preference. But I'm open to whatever the best way to resolve it is from a contractual standpoint, so.
Well, at this point, I'm really gonna be just the scrivener, so it's a matter of what you guys direct to do. Amend it tonight or come back 2 weeks from now if you need Kim here to present, if Dave can handle it. I don't know.
I would feel more comfortable if you had time to look at
Is
it.
fine with us.
I think if you can wait, if it's not time sensitive, then I think, then let's take the time to. it can come back in 2 weeks unless, and if that's the only change we're asking for is you're gonna plug in a few different numbers. Yeah, and it'll come back.
I think 2 weeks, we can do
2
that.
weeks would be great.
Okay.
Does that hinder your sale and go on advertising tickets?
We're already.
They already did.
I mean,
It's all sold
yeah,
out.
that is
That's true.
In that case.
I mean, we've been talking about this since September, but it
Yeah.
is true that we are, in fact, tickets are already on sale, but we'd love to get this signed as soon as possible.
I'll ask if the board wants to put forward a motion.
I move, I just don't have the resolution number in front of me.
This one's
135. 135.
2017, or 8.
That we continue resolution 2018.
17.
Because it was continued from
Sorry,
December.
135. To the, I believe it's January 16th, right?
Yes.
Meeting, so that the town and Planet Bluegrass have a little bit more time to iron out the minimum number and the dollar amount associated with that minimum number.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Are you going to call for the vote? And that passes 6-0. All right, item number 2.
Well, I had a
Trustee
second
Drive.
comment actually on the first, actually realized that it applies to both contracts, so we can take care of them both kind of at the same time. It's on paragraph K, 2K, local ordinance conformance. And it's just a question really about if the phrase conformance with all local ordinances and laws includes section 11-4100 of the code, smoking in parks prohibited. Usually when you have a listing of things that apply, if something's not included in that list, sometimes it's as if it's not included. So I don't know if we should have a reference to the smoking in the parks prohibited ordinance.
That sentence says, to the extent authorized by this agreement, the Board of Trustees grants permits for conduct of described activities as may be required. So is that what your intent is?
Well, it's just that, for example, the liquor in the parks is mentioned, whereas smoking in the parks is not mentioned.
Okay.
And it's just because we've had this discussion before about whether it's clear that even during the festivals, campers and so forth, and at least in my mind, if they put up a tent or something, that, but that smoking in the park is prohibited.
And that is what provision? It's
K.
No,
2K. Okay, provision, section 11-4100 in the municipal code. It says, except as specifically provided in the code, shall be unlawful for any person to smoke in any park. As used in this section, smoking shall have the same meaning found in
right.
Colorado statute.
So you don't intend to grant a permit for the conduct of smoking in the park, correct?
Smoking.
Is saying that that should be added.
Okay, I mean, we can do that.
Just so that it's,
Yeah.
that it's not lost. That's
Okay.
all.
If there's,
And it could be covered by the all, it just confused me a little bit because we have that, all the ordinances apply, but then we go into detail about various things like liquor.
yeah, yes,
And
I understand.
that's all.
Because there's not an including but not limited to, yeah.
All right, is there a motion to continue resolution 2017-136?
So moved.
For the same reason as the first one, since it would apply to the same.
Yes.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? Right, I'll call for the vote. And that passes 6-0 as well. You guys want to just power through? Sure. Need a break or not? All right, all we have left is trustee reports.
Okay. Yes, happy New Year. Oh, there will be a new display here the next time we gather.
Right.
I wasn't at the last SFC meeting. As far as the library goes, I know the site plan review schedule seems very close to being done. And so that way the library can then start the site plan review process. When the site plan review schedule is set, could you just include that in the staff report? It doesn't have to necessarily be the site plan review schedule, but just that it is started. Thank you. And that's it.
Trustee Karas?
Just trustee Jesse, happy New Year to everybody. I also like to thank staff. I meant to mention after we did order 1025 for the work on that, and you getting everything got. I think for us, an ordinance that went, he was done, we went there and we passed. So congratulations to everybody on that. And I have a question on the Dr. Pop properties. I got an email from an ecology board member. They were told that some land's already been designated to botanical gardens. Staff, parks decided things already, or that's just someone?
I've responded to Marie, I believe she's the chair of that group.
Well,
Let her know that upon adoption of the Dr. Bop plan, that there are 2 parcels in the plan that are identified as potential for botanic gardens, and that we would recommend the next step forward would be to meet with the planning staff, the parks director myself, to kind of talk about the pros and cons of each of those sites, and then have them bring forward to you a request of which one they would like you to consider. And then it will be up to the board how you want to proceed with that. All right. So we're going to meet next week, and then I think they're wanting to bring forward a recommendation. I don't know if it'll be ready for January 16th, but probably February.
That's college board meeting January 17th. In the ice works, it's frozen. Good job, Seth.
No, good job, Mother Nature, for helping us with that.
I don't have much. I've been in and out of town and missed a couple of meetings, but I know that the tourism marketing grant subcommittee is moving along fairly quickly because they're getting pressure to spend the money. So we made a lot of progress on where we're going with that, and hopefully we'll come and present something to you. And the EDC has made a lot of progress on just looking at the ordinance and setting goals. And we have a meeting next week on Thursday. And then the marketing committee, we have a weekly Thursday meeting. So I'll be able to report a lot more in the next meeting.
And we've talked about meetings here, so there's nothing separate from that.
I do have actually a little update from Dr. Cog that I want to share with everybody. Dr. Cog is changing the structure of how they allocate all of the TIP money, which is a lot of money that goes to projects for basically transportation mostly. And there's now, I think actually the new format really benefits small communities. It's going to follow a similar format to how the Boulder County Collaborative has worked for flood recovery. So it's basically saying we're going to set aside this certain pot of money for really big projects that are going to span multiple communities, and then we're going to sub-allocate a certain pot of funds that we're going to give to you as a sub-community by county. So the money is going to go to the county. But what this requires us to do is really kind of say what are our projects and how would they qualify and meet the criteria for funding under the TIP federal guidelines. it's a little bit complicated, but I do want to let people know is that they're going to be asking us to approve an IGA that would basically say we're all going to work together as a subgroup to figure out how to allocate the money given to Boulder County through the TIP program. But one of the big questions that's coming up to Dr. Cog at the next meeting for a decision is what percentage of the total pot goes to the big projects versus the subgroups. And so the idea is that federally, this is a different approach that hasn't been used, and so there's a little bit of a caution to say you still need to be doing big regional projects. So even within the subgroups, the question is how many projects would we have that even qualify? So it's still a little bit of an unknown how this is going to work out. This is kind of a trial process to see how this is going to go, but we did have a sub-regional meeting and they gave me a draft of the IGA. I don't know if Paul has brought this back to you all yet, but I can bring it over tomorrow and give you my copy, and he's got the same thing, I'm sure. We need to go through this and get this in front of the board for approval. It'd be probably by resolution, I assume. I'm sure you'll want to take a look at it as well. I did point out, to be really proud of me, that they didn't even list Lyons in the first whereas, so I caught that right off the bat. My work here is done. We're not in the resolution. So anyway, this is a big deal, and I think in the long run, it actually may be really good for us because now we're not competing as a standalone small town against all these big Denver suburbs for money, and might make it easier for us to get some small projects funded. And we'll be really selling to our local county partners, the need for our projects versus trying to explain to people in Denver who have been supportive of Lyons in the past. But it's a little bit harder to kind of help them picture what our issues are when they maybe don't get up here very often. So I'm mostly really in favor of it. I think the question is it going to be 65% that goes to the sub-communities or 85 or even 90%? So that makes a big difference countywide, and when the county's list of projects is hundreds of millions of dollars, then you're competing again still for that money internally. So, but the idea is that everyone should benefit from these funds in some way. So I was potentially going to end up being out of town for the next Dr. Cog meeting, but my schedule's changed, so I'm planning I should be here for it. But in the event something changes, the Mayor Pro Tem is up to speed and can go vote on our behalf. So, and other than that, I just want to say Happy New Year. Packets are out. You know who you are.
And no one's come to pick up one yet?
No one's picked one up out of the gate? Gee, that's a shocker. Day after New Year holiday.
Would you like to make a proclamation?
Oh, I would. Would you? Thank you for
Great.
reminding me. I have been getting over a cold, so I'm a little foggy.
I think it's because you like radon.
I like radon. Clearly it's impacting my brain. So, okay. All right. I did do this last year, and I actually do think this is really important. I tested my house after doing this because I hadn't really thought about it. So I would like to make a proclamation in support of Radon Action Month in Colorado. Whereas radon is an invisible, odorless, radioactive gas that threatens the health of our citizens and their families, and whereas radon is likely the leading environmental cause of cancer mortality in the U.S. and the 8th leading cause of cancer mortality overall, and whereas the Colorado Rocky Mountain region has been ranked Zone 1, an area with the highest radon potential possible by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and whereas Colorado residential radon data has shown 50% of Colorado homes tested as being at or above the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency radon action level of 4 PCI per liter, picocuries per liter of air, and whereas any home in Lyons, Colorado may have elevated levels of radon, even if homes in the same neighborhood do not, and whereas testing for radon is simple and inexpensive, and whereas identified radon problems can be fixed, and whereas Boulder County Public Health, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the American Lung Association are supporting efforts to encourage Americans to test their homes for radon, have elevated levels of radon reduced, and have new homes built with radon-resistant features. Now, therefore, I, Connie Sullivan, Mayor of Lyons, Colorado, do hereby proclaim January 1st through the 31st of 2018 official National Radon Action Month in Lyons, Colorado. There you go. Go test your homes.
Can I do one other quick staff announcement? I do want to let people know that we're trying to keep up with new technologies and the look of things. You're going to see a newly updated, revised monthly newsletter, which is great. We will be producing a annual review, a little annual report that we hope to have done by the end of next week. And we have new Town of Lyons cards that all of you have available if you want to use them to write notes to people and some of that. And Kim's already left. She's spearheading all of those different things. So the Community Services Department is doing really well. Ice skating was a hit over the weekend with very little notice. 2 days of rentals was like $160. And people came out to rent skates and skate, and it sounds to me we need to do a little resurfacing. It was well used. And but it sounds like a feature people have been waiting for, so good to get that back.
Santa brought some ice skates to our house this
Oh,
year.
he did. So I have 3 of these I'd like each of you to sign before you leave, so I can send them to the collaborative members that allocated the $1 million.
Great. Thank you. And would you please make sure Joseph knows that we were done by 9:10? And he just revenge is sweet. Do we have any summary of action items we wanted to review?
No. Go ahead. I highlighted. Action items include following up with SURSA on the ADA parking stalls, implementing the stormwater utility action items that you designated, and including a schedule on the library site review process when it becomes available in the next week or so. Preparing for an IGA to come forward for Dr. Cog. And that's about it.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Woo. We're off to a good start.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good job.